Hello guys and gals, and welcome! So today I wanted to talk about the Diablo 4 Necromancer. Specifically a very specific part of the Diablo 4 Necromancer, and that is the Book of the Dead. So, like many people, I have been intrigued by some of these additional things. This in particular is the Book of the Dead for the Necromancer, and what it does is it allows you to have an army and sacrifice the army for benefits. So, for instance, right now you can see there are three categories on the Book of the Dead. We have the Skeletal Warriors, the Skeletal Mages, and the Golems. Now, we did get information on this back in the Necromancer quarterly update, and they gave us kind of like a brief overview of what would happen, but then we didn't actually get like the stats or anything. So today I'd like to go over the stats, or at least what I have of them. So first off, let's start off with the Skeletal Defenders. That is three different skeletons. There is the Skirmishers, the Defenders, and the Reapers. Now, I don't have screenshots of the Skirmishers or the Reapers, but I do have a screenshot of the Defenders, and that one is pretty cool. So what we have here is an actual listing of what the defenders do. So as you can see here, it says durable shield bearers with 15% increased life. Every 10 seconds, your skeletal defenders negate the next instance of direct damage that they would normally take. Increases the amount of thorns that the defender warriors inherit from you from 30 to 50%. And then there's also the sacrificial ability, which is you gain a 15% non-physical resistance, but you can no longer raise skeletal warriors. So sacrificing the defenders will get you an interesting bonus to your non-physical reses, so fire, lightning, ice, etc. Maybe even arcane too. Now the skirmishers are very simple creatures. Those are your basic warriors. They have increased damage, but reduced life. They are essentially just your standard attacking warriors. They're neither defensive nor really offensive, just sort of like somewhere in between. The Reapers, on the other hand, which again I don't have a screenshot of the Reapers. The Reapers are slower attack speed, which means they tend to attack less often. However, they deal a frontal AoE cone, which means they're better for large groups of monsters. And they also have a large wind-up attack that deals a high amount of damage in a single target hit, which could be perhaps better for PvP. Come to think of it, because burst damage tends to do better in PvP because it gives the target less time to heal, retreat, evade, etc. If you can kill somebody in one hit, it's a lot easier to bring them down than if it takes a large number of successive hits. Now, granted, you can still kill them with sustained damage, but it's been my experience in the long run that in PvP, burst damage tends to win more often. I also have some screenshots of the mages as well. So there are three different mages, and I have two of the three mages. The first of the mages we're going to go over is the Bone Mage. So we have a Shadow, Cold, and the Bone, and I'm not entirely sure what the Shadow does. I'll see if I can figure out that before the video ends. But as far as my research has come up, I've come up blank. The Bone uses its own bones as projectiles, dealing heavy damage for a life cost. Reduces the life of your Bone Mage's attacks from 15 to 10% after being alive for 5 seconds. Bone Mages deal 40% increased damage. So if you can manage to keep your Bone Mages alive, they get an increase in damage output, maybe some sort of healing set up with that. Each time a Bone Mage dies from its own attacks, they leave behind a corpse and fortify you for 2,188. Sacrificial Power. Your overpower damage is increased by 30%, but you can no longer raise skeletal mages. We also have the Cold Mage screenshot, which I have right here. Here we go. The Cold Mages chill and freezes enemies, which makes them, I believe, kind of more like a crowd control kind of a character. Each time your Cold Mages damage enemies with their primary attacks, you gain 2 essence. So not only are they a crowd control, but they're also an essence builder. Enemies who are frozen or damaged while frozen by your cold mage's primary attacks are made vulnerable for 3 seconds. And I'm not quite sure what the vulnerable effect does, but when I saw it on players, being vulnerable was definitely a bad thing, and you took a lot of increased damage while you were vulnerable. So having a monster vulnerable for 3 seconds could potentially increase your damage output nicely. The sacrificial power of the cold mages is you deal 15 or times 15% increased damage to vulnerable enemies, but you can no longer raise skeletal mages. And I do actually have all 3 of the golems, but as I promised you guys, I'm going to take a look and see if I can figure out what the power of the shadow one is real quick. All right, so while I was not able to find a screenshot or any specific information about the shadow mages themselves, I have found something interesting which could give us a hint into what the shadow mages are. And if you know and you want to give the answer down in the comments, feel free. But it says right here that darkness skills use shadow magic to overwhelm their enemies. These kind of attacks tend to be damage over time based or attack multiple times in a short window, with various benefits and rewards being granted for damaging enemies in this way. Darkness skills also tend to have various debuffs and crowd control elements so they can keep their enemies at bay while they die a slow and painful death. Decompose is a basic darkness skill that allows you to channel dark magic onto enemies, dealing damage to them while also generating essence. Unlike other basic skills, Decompose also periodically summons corpses, making it easier to ensure that you have a steady supply on hand. Another darkness skill is Blight. Blight launches a ball of dark energy, which sounds very good for a shadow mage, in the direction. Upon hitting an enemy or expiring, it deals an explosive damage while leaving behind a defiled area, dealing periodic damage to enemies inside over time. The skill deals high amounts of damage to enemies who are standing in place, whether that's due to fighting your undead minions or being contained via other skills like Bone Prison. So there's a possibility that we could be looking at a damage over time model skeletal mage here, and maybe that's what's going on, because the shadow mage definitely does look like an interesting choice. I mean, even just the icon there, we have little spikes coming out and like multiple hits, so it's got like 3 arrows coming in to the center. If it is a damage over time mage, that could make a very interesting choice, especially if you're fighting bosses that stand still a lot. Next on the list is definitely the golems. So the first golem on the list is the bone golem. And the bone golem is a rather interesting one. Let me see if I can pull that screenshot up. There we go. The bone golem is a taunter. He's a tank. So he taunts enemies in a wide area. Each time your bone golem takes up to 20% of its maximum life as damage, it sheds a corpse. So not only is he a tank, but he's also a corpse generator. Your bone golem gains 10% maximum life, and the amount of thorns they inherit from you is increased by 30 to 50%. The sacrifice for the bone golem is you gain 10% increased attack speed, but you lose the ability to summon your golem. The next golem is the blood golem, and as you would think, the blood golem is about stealing life. So drains life from nearby enemies. Your blood golem absorbs 15% of damage you would take. While healthy, your blood golem gains 25% damage reduction and a times 25% increased damage. For his sacrificial power, your maximum life increased by 10%, but you lose the ability to summon the golem. So it's very interesting here that he's basically like a damage sponge. So 15% of all the damage that you would normally take is going to go to the blood golem instead. And he also drains life from nearby enemies, healing himself. So in effect, he's essentially just going to be helping keep you alive in dangerous situations, which is exactly what the blood golem is supposed to be for. The next golem, which is the iron golem, is an interesting one. The iron golem seems to be based around damage output, stuns. It says slams the ground and stuns enemies. Every 5th Iron Golem attack causes a shockwave, dealing 16% of the damage, and it shows the number, 3,000 to 4,000, damage to primary enemy and to enemies behind them. Your Iron Golem's slam attack also makes enemies vulnerable for 3 seconds, which is nice. And the sacrificial power for the Iron Golem is you deal times 30% increased critical strike damage, but you lose the ability to summon a golem. So here we have a very interesting setup with the Book of the Dead. The Book of the Dead is offering you a lot of interesting options to, either take or leave. You've got skeletal warriors, skeletal mages, and golems. You have 3 in each category, and that makes what, for a total of 3, 6, 9 choices. And of course, you can mix and match them, 100 different ways. What is the variables on that? Three choices. My quick math is terrible. Hold on. I believe it's 27 combinations, if I did my math correct. So 27 different ways that you could potentially build your warriors, including, I think, if we add one more, so 28 for essentially 0. So if we say that, actually, you know what? I did the math wrong, because technically you can have no mages, no warriors, and no golems, and you can multiply that, so it's 4 instead of 3. So 4 different combinations. So it's 4 times 4 times 4. I freaking paused the video, still did the math wrong. So we're talking about 60, I think it's 64 total combinations for the Book of the Dead, to make your character into a very powerful character. It's really kind of interesting. Whether you want to go with the no minion setup and build your Necromancer a certain way, or whether you want to go with a full minion setup and build your Necromancer a certain way. Seems like you've got some interesting options. Anyway, I wanted to go over the Book of the Dead because we did have enough information, I felt like, to give something, as opposed to back in, what was it, June or whatever, when they gave us the Necromancer update. Like, they really just kind of teased it, and we didn't actually get enough information back in June. So now we have enough to actually kind of see what the hell's going on with the army, and understand what each individual piece of the army is for. Like, we know that the bone golem now is the tank. We know that the skeletal mages have 3 different ones, and we're pretty sure that the shadow one seems to be a damage over time element. And then of course we know the skeleton warriors. We've got your standard fanfare warrior, your AoE damage warrior, and then your tanky warrior. So you could definitely go with a very tanky setup, it seems like. Like, you could do like the ice mages with the defenders with the bone golem, and you'd have a freezing effect going on, which is your crowd control, and 2 very tanky minions, which should be able to handle just about anything you throw at them. I mean, the ability to negate damage every certain number of hits is certainly pretty powerful on the defender, that literally just has the ability to just block out damage entirely. Well, let's talk about that for just a second. Every 10 seconds, the skeleton defenders just simply negate an entire hit, and that hit could be massive. Like, you could be fighting a boss that could one-shot them, and then just it does nothing because it's on their negation cycle. That's pretty interesting effect. And I don't know how tanky that actually makes them, but they definitely have more life, and they have the ability to absorb hits, which is certainly interesting. And the blood golem seems like a very interesting choice if you're in a very, like, just damaging area. Like, the blood golem is definitely going to be a way for the necromancer to survive hits that he might not otherwise be able to hit. 15% additional, or rather reduced damage for everything is a lot, especially when you consider the fact that you already have resistances and things like that. And so, in combination with maybe other defensive mechanics, the blood golem could keep you alive almost indefinitely, assuming, of course, the blood golem itself doesn't die. And then we have all the sacrificial effects, like being able to increase your maximum life, your crit chance, your overpower damage, and all of that comes into play if you were trying to, figure out what to do, how to build your character, how to get the most DPS out of him. And I feel like there's going to be a lot of situations where you're gonna mix and match the army to the character's specific needs, and I think that's pretty cool. Anyway, as always, I do appreciate you guys and gals watching my videos, even when I'm just ranting about the Book of the Dead for, like 15 minutes. As always, keep watching.